It's your boy K Rock Dizzle. I'm back at it with another episode of Crackhead with a Microphone, the only podcast in the world where you hear a crackhead a microphone and you listen to him talk until you wonder if you're the high one. My name is K Rock Dizzle. Let's get into it. All right, guys, it's the episode I promised y'all. I know a lot of people are waiting on it. This is A Town Full of Degenerates, chapters 3 and 4. I'm going to read these chapters. I do just want to give forewarning. If you have not heard the episode titled A Town Full of Degenerates, I highly suggest that you listen to that episode before listening to this one. Because this is a direct jumping off point. That episode was chapters 1 and 2. This episode is chapters 3 and 4. And we are jumping right in. So if you have not listened to that episode, please go listen to that episode. It is not far. You can find it. It's titled properly. As for everybody who's caught up, let's get into the story. The next day, Ron woke up and went on about his day pretending yesterday didn't happen. He was up pretty early considering the rest of the town was still at a rager at Matt's. He expected since he had always been more he expected this since he had always been more of an early morning person. So he decided to go for a walk while the town was still asleep and recovering. While he was out walking, he got a text from Bob. Um sorry. While he was still out walking, he got a text from Bob asking if he was awake. He responded that he was, and Bob told him to stop by the store so they could chat. Ron agreed and made his way there. He walked through his town for a few blocks and had a feeling of peace. This peacefulness was something that he hadn't felt outside of his home since moving to town. When he got there, the door was locked. He called Bob and took him outside, and Bob came downstairs and answered the door. Ron walked in and Bob asked him if he was okay. Ron said he was, but Bob felt so bad. He started apologizing, stating that he didn't realize that Matt had hated him so much. Has he been messing with you at school? What's his beef with you? Oh, he's hated me since the first day of school. Him and Elizabeth both feel like I made him look like an idiot since I don't do drugs. There was this whole thing where Elizabeth thought I was some dealer, and Nate thought I lied, and this whole macho persona fell apart since I wasn't scared of him. Oh, well, he was totally about to deck you yesterday before I came and stepped in. You think you could have taken him? Oh, I had a knife in my pocket. He doesn't know, but the second he touched me, he would have got stabbed. Bob was shook. This kid seemed so nice and chill. The idea that he had a knife and caught their altercation before it got potentially fatal was spine chilling. He didn't condemn it though. Pretty much everyone knew Matt was a piece of shit, but most people just put up with it because he and his family have too much power in this town. Even Elizabeth couldn't bring herself to leave him because he could literally ruin her life. Ron, on the other hand, he had nothing to lose. No one knew about this kid, where he came from, what he did after school, his likes, his hates, his lifestyle. All of it was pretty much a mystery to everyone except for Bob. And to be honest, if Matt died, a lot more people will live a happier life. He put his hand on Ron's shoulder, struggling to form words before tapping into his business side. Listen, man, I understand where your head was at. I just don't want you to do anything you might regret. I'm sure that he'll leave you alone from now on, and there's not much he can do to you in school anyway. I just don't want you to end up hurt or in jail or anything. Ron responded, yeah, I feel you, trust me. It's only if he actually touches me that I'll do something. After that, they were having a regular conversation as usual. After about 30 minutes, Ron got a text from his phone. It was a cat sending a simple, hey, with 3 Ys. He was slightly surprised that she was awake this early, but he had questions for her. It was perfect timing because Bob had a delivery to make in the city, so he had to be on his way anyway. They said their goodbyes and parted ways. Ron headed home, and once he was inside his kitchen, he called Kat. He was making himself some breakfast while on the phone. The phone rang for a bit before a shy hello could be heard on the line. Ron responded back pretty blankly. Good morning. Are you okay? Kat was in her bedroom, shaking from the nervousness. She wasn't sure what the first words from his mouth would be, but that certainly was an unexpected question. She thought for a moment and responded, yeah, good morning. Why do you ask? Also, are you busy right now? Ron was cooking breakfast and could hear her voice slurring, and the words weren't coming out super crisp. He once again stayed calm and pretty much started listing the reasons he asked. Well, you were the only one in the school to mention the party to me. You looked hella disappointed when I told Matt I wasn't going to the party. When I showed up to the party and you saw me, your face glowed. And when Matt and Elizabeth were pressing me for answers, you defended me. And yes, I'm cooking while we're talking, so I'm kind of busy, but not really. See, now any sensible person would have come to the conclusion that this person has a crush on him. But Ron was different. In his hometown, he was at the bottom of the social totem pole pretty much for his entire life. Liking video games and cartoons didn't score you any cool points, and no girl to this point had actually shown positive interest in him. He had been pranked a few times, though, being confided in that someone liked him so that he could publicly get rejected and humiliated. All of this that Cat was doing was noticeable, but putting Ron more on guard than anything else. This was more of an interrogation to him than any sort of kind gesture. He was new in town and past being the butt of an entire school. He followed up by saying that it's been clear that Cat has had her eyes on him more than most other people have, especially for people that roll with Elizabeth and Matt. Cat began cringing from embarrassment in her room, but kept the conversation going. Well, I'm okay, but I was just wondering what your deal is. You walk around all silent and mysterious, and I just want to know what's going on in that head of yours. I was just surprised when you came to the party because Ron cut her off. Hey, are you still tired or maybe over? You know, you might need to sleep it off. You sound a little off. Cat exploded. Don't you judge me, you sober fucking prip. You don't know what it's like to. A pause happened as her words dragged off, followed by some rushed footsteps and then a retching sound that was heard. Cat started breathing heavily on the phone. Ryan was completely able to tell what had just happened. He shook his head but stayed silent for a while, continuing cooking his breakfast. His baking was beginning to sizzle in the pan, and Kat could hear it from the other end. She got back to the phone and wanted to get back to her rant, but Ron cut her off. Listen, come to my place. I'll give you some food and water. You'll be fine. And for the sake of your friendship with Elizabeth, we can pretend this conversation never happened. Deal? Kat looked into the phone, and while the prospect of going to a stranger's house seems terrifying, she was drunk enough to take the offer. Fine. Text me your address. Ron chuckled and then responded, okay, but text me your name. I don't feed strangers, before hanging up. Kat was appalled at the realization that he didn't even know her name, yet he was inviting her to his house. She sat on the bathroom floor for a minute while the phone buzzed with Ron's address. She looked at it and responded, my name is Kat. He sent a thumbs up emoji. For as much as she wanted to be mad at him right now, she really couldn't. He was just so forward when talking to her and asking her what she wanted that she didn't even want to yell at him anymore. She had the same feeling that she had when she drew the emoji on the note. She got dressed as best as she could and called a ride to his house. Meanwhile, Ron finished cooking up a pretty sizable breakfast. He made waffles, sausage, bacon, eggs, and grits, and cut some fruits, and sauteed some veggies in case she wanted an omelet. Yeah, he didn't know a thing about her and didn't want to look stupid, so he overcooked. After about 5 minutes, there was a knock on the door. He came and opened the door, and there she was. This 5'2", chubby loser of a white girl was standing in Ron's doorway. She was a nervous wreck and barely even standing due to still being drunk from the previous night. But Ron, being the master of chill, simply handed her a water bottle and brought her inside to the kitchen. She sat down and noticed all of the food he had made. She looked up at Ron, who was cleaning up a bit while throwing a kettle of water on the stove. Hey, you can help yourself to whatever. Sorry I made so much. I wasn't sure what you actually like to eat. He chuckled a bit, having absolutely no sense of nervousness, and Kat just couldn't believe herself. She made herself a plate, and Ron sat down and she began to eat. It was a pretty silent breakfast, partially because Ron knew that for any real conversation to be had, she needed to get a little better, but also because Kat was such a nervous wreck that she couldn't form any words. She just kept eating the food. Soon the kettle began to steam, and while the whistle could be heard, Kat asked what it was, as it came to a surprise that Ron simply stated that he was making her some tea to help cleanse her body. She was dumbfounded by she was dumbfounded that he was being so nice and simply blurted out, "All right, I get it, Mr. Mysterious. You can be nice to me even though I'm Elizabeth's best friend, but why are you friend zoning me?" Ron was pouring the tea and kind of just sat down at the table a bit confused. "What are you talking about?" "I invited you to a party with an eggplant emoji on that note. I was ready to show you a good time, but in front of me and everyone in the school, you pretty much declined my offer. Do you not think I'm sexy? Then you come to a party with Bob. I just don't get it. What's the problem here?" Ron was a bit irked at this point. "My problem is that you invited me to a party and you knew it would be a death trap if I showed up. You knew what Matt was willing to do to me if I showed up at his house." Ron was trying to stay calm in the situation and didn't raise his tone despite Kat being as confrontational as she could be. Kat looked at him for a while and realized that he wasn't even mad, he was just confused. She took a deep breath and said that she was sorry. She figured that with all of the people in the party, that you and Matt wouldn't have even crossed paths. She miscalculated and wanted to make it up to him. She tried to use seductive eyes on him, reached out to touch him before bending forward in the chair to reach for his bleep. Ron took a breath. He was unfazed by her, but took her words into consideration before pulling away and stating what he did next. "Listen, I just don't think what you did was super bright. You put Matt in a lot of danger when you did that." Kat was shocked. Matt was in danger? How? Why? What was going to happen to him? Did Ron think he could take Matt in a fight? Ron continued. I know you're friends with that group, and I'm willing to say that the two of us have no beef. But I think it's best if we don't do anything we might regret or chat too much in public. They wouldn't be too kind if they ever found out that you told me about the party. There's just too much risk." Kat was heartbroken. She looked she looked at him in shock and amazement. She was about to do things to him and his man pushed her away. No one had ever pushed her away. She tried to respond back smoothly. "Well, what if the risk is worth the reward?" Only for him to respond with, "I just don't think it is." His tone, though, he wasn't angry or screaming. He just didn't want to. This was a completely different situation that Kat had never found herself in. For all of the teasing and name calling she would get in school, those same guys would tell her that they loved her when it came to fucking. Even some of the kids' dads would text her on Snapchat asking to meet up or even for news. Yet, it's a town full of degenerates. I know. And now here comes this kid who passes on sex like solid at a pizza bar. She just said okay and got up, having not even finished her food. As she angrily made her way to the door, she was holding out hope that this kid would come to his senses. So when she heard him say, "Hey," she turned around with blissful hope, only to be shot down once again. He handed her a Tupperware container with some more food and a thermos full of water, claiming that he had made extra for her. She took it, feeling heartbroken again, but only let out a thank you. She made her way out the door and headed home tearing up. This was rock bottom for her. She was clearly nothing more than a fat plaything, and even ugly outcasts and loners wouldn't touch her. She called a ride home, and when she was in the car, she bawled her eyes out and all the way home. She then went to her room and took her phone out, wanting to call Elizabeth, but realized she couldn't confide in her feelings to her. She sat there and thought, and her sadness started turning to anger. This fucking loser denied her, and she wasn't going to let him off of the hook that easily. She was going to seduce and fuck him. Oh